All right, it's time to talk basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thebeachbasket.net. He's Steve Purciello, longtime educator, vice principal, high school coach, and athletic director. And this is the 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts Overtime podcast. Now, during the NBA offseason, Steve and I have been discussing NBA stars from the 60s, 70s, and 80s by talking about them with someone who watched them play. Today, we've discussed Will Chamberlain, Sam Jones, Rick Barry, Pistol Pete Maravich, Jerry West, John Havlicek, man, it's a long list, Oscar Robertson, Earl Monroe, and Bill Russell. Today, though, we have a special show. Instead of discussing NBA greats from the past, we're discussing the state of the current NBA with one of its greatest referees, Scott Foster. Scott Foster started officiating games in the 1994-95 season, so he has been at this for 30 years. He's called games with some of the greatest players in the game, including Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, all the way through to today's greats, Jason Tatum, and tons more. Can't list them. According to the NBRA, the National Basketball Referee Association site, he has officiated 1,675 regular season games and 241 playoff games, including Game 7 of the 2010 NBA Finals between the Lakers and the Boston Celtics, as well as some other ones where, Boston came out on top, which we have to call out for
Quite
fairness.
a few.
With that as an introduction, Steve and I are thrilled to welcome to 13 Rules, Scott Foster. Scott, thank you so much for being here today.
It's excited to be here. Good to see you guys.
Appreciate
Fire
that.
away.
Let's go. Let's talk about it. We're a site dedicated to basketball. We're a site made up of fans. We're coming at this from a fan's perspective. Got a few things to ask you, but we want to start with your path, right, to becoming an NBA referee. How'd you do it? How do people do it if this is something they want to do? And along the same lines, what do you remember about the first time you had that whistle and took an NBA court for a game?
Oh, there's a lot more before I got to the NBA court. I got lucky. I was coaching my little brothers in basketball, and a guy said to me after their game, "Hey, if you stay, we'll give you $5 to referee the next game." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds good." So I stayed and refereed. And then about a month later, I took my brother's team to a tournament. And the guy said, part of this deal is you have to stay and referee a game. We'll give you $10 towards your entry fee. And so I stayed. And I remember a guy going baseline, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I saw a foul. And I blew my whistle, and I actually put my fist up, and I went to the table and I reported it. And it gave me this great satisfaction. So I said, I think I like this referee thing. So I stopped coaching. I picked up coaching my daughter's AAU team some years later, but I stopped coaching and I started refereeing for Montgomery County Rec Department for $3.90. That was minimum wage in probably 86. And I was taking courses at Montgomery Junior College for 1 year before I went to Maryland. And my accounting teacher, Bill Johnstone, walked by my desk after one of my tests, and I happened to have the Federation rule book out. And he looked at me and he says, "What are you doing?" And I thought he was admonishing me for not doing my accounting when I was done the test. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm ready high school rule book. I'm refereeing bitty bites down at the rec center, $3.90 an hour." And he says, "Oh, that's a stupid idea. You need to go over here. Let me make a phone call." So it turns out he was a high school referee. He made a phone call, got me into the class, which was in his third week of 6. And I took the class for 3 more weeks. And I just passed the test by the skin of my teeth. And I became a IBO certified referee in 1986. And so back then, no cell phones, none of that silliness. And so I'd come home from college, and my grandmother would have a list of games for me to go referee. And I'd go into DC or Rockville or Montgomery County. And I'd work like 3 o'clock at the middle school and 5 o'clock at the JV. And then I'd go to the men's rec league at 6. And then at 9 o'clock, I'd go to the Say No to Drugs League and on. So this went on all through my college days. And the nice thing about going to University of Maryland was, as I got started, I was close to places like DeMassa and Gonzaga, and because I could go in the back door from University of Maryland to Washington, D.C. So I was working Dunbar and Cardozo and some really high level basketball in the D.C. area. That helped me get going. And I had some nice mentors along the way who helped me out. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you got to go to this referee school." So I went to the ACC referee school run by Fred Bearcat, did okay my first year, came back the second year and was ranked one of the top 3 guys in that camp. And there was a couple NBA referees who had just been added to the roster of the NBA when they went from 2-man to 3-man. And they gave my name to the NBA. And the next summer, the NBA came to look at me at James Madison, and they took me to the LA Pro Summer League. And so when I went to the LA Pro Summer League, I really, in my mind, wanted to be an ACC referee. And I thought this would help me get there. I had no thoughts of being an NBA referee, even though George Tolliver said, "I think you're a natural being an NBA referee." I was like, that's insane. And so I was out on the court hoping to do Duke, North Carolina. And I ran down the court my first game, and they were playing. It was Boston versus Seattle. And I don't remember which one of you is the Boston fan, but just so you know, Boston lost that game. And Rick Fox was a rookie. Gary Payton, I believe, was a rookie. Sean Kemp was in his second year. And so Gary Payton running down the left wing, he throws an alley-oop pass that's way too high, way too high. And I just quit on the play. And I'm like, yeah, what's he doing? And all of a sudden, Sean Kemp comes out of nowhere. And I'm looking through the rim, and he unleashes the most ferocious dunk I've seen in my 31 years, or actually, so that would be 31 plus 4. So 35 years of pro basketball. Best dunk I saw in 35 years. And think about that. And I just, my mouth went, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. And I remember thinking, screw the ACC. I want to be an NBA referee. And so from that moment on, it was all very targeted. It's what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And I remember during that game, the Boston coach, I don't remember his name. The center's name was Igor. He was from somewhere in Europe. And I called a foul on him. It was probably terrible. And he says, don't worry, Igor, that guy's never going to make it to the NBA. And I've been waiting now 31 years to see that guy. So I could tell him. I'm sure he knows that I made it, but I would love to see him go, huh, didn't think I'd make it, huh? Anyway, that was how the deal went for me from beginning to end to the NBA. I did 2 years in the CBA, which was exponential learning, 2-man officiating, I should say 2 young men officiating, because mostly 20-year-olds. We were just out there learning on the job, teaching one another, surviving. And that league was just a really cool, you could do a whole podcast on the CBA, just a really cool experience for, I think, players, mascots, cheerleaders, you name it. We're all trying to get to the NBA. We're all cheering for one another. Coaches, Flip Saunders was there when I was there, and Eric Musselman and people like that. So we had 2 years in the CBA, which I could tell stories on that all night. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to connect with the Rain Man, Sean Camp, and tell him his part in your origin story? Because that's pretty cool.
I've seen Gary a bunch of times. I've seen Gary Payton tons of times. I've told him that story. In fact, his last year, I believe he played 17 years in the NBA. He bought me a drink. It was after the season was over. I saw him at a bar and I said, maybe I should buy you the drink since I cost you all this money and fines and technical fouls and that sort of thing. And he couldn't have been more gracious. He was a totally different guy than the trash talking Gary Payton that I met. Most of the stories I have about players are that where I find that I love these stories are off the floor, right? So I've seen Gary Payton in a bar and he buys me a drink while he's playing pool. And I told him that story and we had a good laugh about some other stuff that happened during our careers. But yeah, so I haven't seen Sean ever at a game. But I see Gary because obviously his son plays in the league and he's still connected in some ways with the leagues, but not Sean.
Scott, the first NBA game you worked.
November 9th, 1994, I believe was the date. A young and spry second year Shaquille O'Neal played a team at Charlotte, and they had 2 guys by the name of Larry Johnson and Alonzo Mourning on the team. And what I remember about that game is it went to double or triple overtime, and I called a play on Nick Anderson that was not very good. Didn't cost anybody the game, just wasn't a very good call. And Nick Anderson still likes to remind me of that 31 years later when I see him in Orlando. But I remember Larry and Alonzo were trying to foul Shaquille as he went into his upward shooting motion. And so he had 290-pound man on this side. He had 290-pound man on this side. And he just took them both up to the rim and just dunked it. And I remember thinking, everybody talked about how big Shaquille was, but his agility, his speed, his strength, that was what was impressive me. Because there's lots of guys, so we see guys who aren't in the NBA walking down the street who are 7'4", but this guy was just an amazing specimen of a human being. And to be able to pull up in my first game and do that was like really an amazing feat. So yeah, that was my first game. And my second game was actually with Ed Rush in San Antonio. The Knicks played, and I learned a valuable lesson that day. It was after that game. We were talking about, did my dad watch? It was again my third game with Ed, and he said, "Did your dad watch the game?" I said, "Nah, he just watches the big games." I didn't mean it like I meant it as in my dad thinks it's a big game. Every game was a big game to me, and it still is. It's how I prepare for every game. But Ed Rush really drilled it home with me for the rest of my career that you have to take every game, whether it's October 3rd or June 3rd, the same, and prepare the way you want to perform on a consistent basis. So I actually remember my second game and things I learned more from Ed Rush than what my first game was.
That's so interesting and something I hadn't had planned to ask, but I think it's important, right? How do you get up for a Tuesday night game in Charlotte, right, against a bad Grizzlies team? Let's just say, how do you that?
If you ask Michael Jordan the same question, he's going to go out and try and score 40 on him. But if you ask any person who wants to be elite at what they do, I don't care if you're a teacher or whatever, you have to prepare every single day and get up for your day and go out to work. And so for me, there's the fear of failure. And there's plenty of fear of Twitter and everything, the ridicule that comes with my job, even on a good night. So if I take a night off or I don't get up for that game, I'm letting the game down for that's the biggest thing. You don't want to let the game down. I'm letting down my partners. I'm letting down the NBA. I have to focus every night and prepare every night. And really, if you do that, it makes it so when you get to June 3rd and you have 300 million people all over the world watching you work game 4 in the NBA finals or game 7 in the NBA finals, it takes some of that nervousness away because you've prepared every single night. Whereas if you take it,
Right.
oh, I'm going to work hard tonight, not tomorrow, you're not going to have a successful career. I don't care what career you have, whether you're an NBA referee or a teacher or whatever. So yeah, being consistent in your preparation every night is big. And I've never had a problem getting up for a game. I have routines I go through every night. And when the ball goes up, I'm excited to be there every single night. So, yeah.
Super cool. Super
Well,
cool. Well, we're talking about, oh, go ahead, Steve.
no, I just wanted to follow along the toughest call you have to make in a game.
Yeah, if everybody will say block charge or something like that. For referees, it's out of bounds for me anyway. You had the ball bouncing around, it could hit 1 of 3 feet or 100 different tip of his fingers and goes out of bounds at lightning pace away from it on a closed angle or it just shoots out and you look for help. And so for me, slowing down and getting out of bounds plays is really the toughest play. Block charge for me isn't difficult because we're trained to pick up the defender, see their legality, and then there's a collision, right? So you can figure out was he legal or not legal. And no matter how fast that is, as long as your eyes are moving to where they're supposed to be, you're ahead of it. So it'd be like being a hitter. And this is a lot. Being a hitter, sometimes I give this analogy from officiating. When I'm really on my game, a 90-mile-per-hour fastball looks like a 75-mile watermelon. And when I'm struggling a little bit, a 70-mile-per-hour fastball looks like a little pea. Having quick eyes, and it's interesting to me that we have younger officials that figured out that you should train your eyes just like you do your biceps, and training our eyes to be quick. And so I have an app in the game, in the locker room, part of my routine that I go through, and you're searching for things. You're playing a game, and it's a video game, but you're playing this game and it keeps your eyes moving rapidly quick. So as you get older, it hopefully helps you zoom in, zoom out, as people like we talked about with Sean Kemp coming to the rim at 400 miles per hour. And now all of a sudden someone comes out of nowhere and being able to see that contact. Yeah. So there's lots of things like that, but out of bounds is the toughest call for me.
Good, Jose.
Historically.
We talked a lot about your first year, your first couple of games. Back then, nobody knew who you were, right? Today, you take the court, people know who you are. Scott, how has that changed maybe your preparation? Who was Scott Foster then and who's Scott Foster now? What's changed in 30 years?
My hair color's changed. I went from black to gray. So that's the biggest thing that's changed. How fast I run's changed. But people might think, oh, Scott likes that part. The last thing in the world I want to do is be seen or be heard from or have to talk to a pool reporter after the game about what just happened in the game or be talked about on Twitter, which is just part of the job now. When I got in the NBA, social media wasn't part of the job. And unfortunately for me, it is now. I would say my first year in the league, my first couple of years, right out of the gate, I had a situation my second year, my first nationally televised game on NBC. That was the way your career works in the NBA is you are an umpire. That means you're the lowest person on the crew. And then you hope to get some games that are high profile and you're being rewarded in some way. Well, back then anyway, maybe not so much now, but back then it was like, if I could work in NBC, that's really showing that they trust me. This was back in 1995. And so I was given a game on NBC. It was Phoenix and the Lakers. And during the week, Dennis Rodman had headbutted Teddy Bernhard and Nick Van Exel had bumped into Ronnie Garrettson. And then a lot of people came out and were like, hey, this can't happen. And honest mistake, but we had a game and no call, and Magic and I bumped into one another and I had ejected him from a game. And then all of a sudden, that's the first time the spotlight came on. I remember at halftime going to the locker room and Bob Costas is talking about it on TV. And it was like Kennedy just got shot again, or the space shuttle just blew up again. It was like this big thing. And the only thing that kept me from the cover of Sports Illustrated is Greg Norman blowing the 6-shot lead to Nick Faldo. Anyway, Magic was so gracious, sent me a nice letter afterwards, after the incident, that sort of thing, the class act that he is. And we moved on from there at whatever. I remember the next night going to Denver and Greg Grant had a problem with the play, and it was a playoff kind of game. Whoever won was going to the playoffs, I believe, because it was like the last Tuesday of the season. And when he went to ask me a question, he was like, hey, Scott. And I went, yeah. And he was, oh, never mind. And I went, huh? And he goes, if you'll throw Magic, I know you'll throw me way out of here. And I was like, wait, that's not true. Come on. But that's the first spotlight I had. And then throughout over the next 29 years, it just became to grow, and you get the bigger games that are on national TV over and over again, or you're getting the finals games for 20 years, or your social media is beating you up over an article that was written about you. that's gonna happen. The way you deal with it is you just go out and do the work, and hopefully the work speaks for itself.
Yeah. But I'm in LA. Steve's in Boston, a Boston fan, not in Boston. But I remember that was Magic had just come back, right? And so
Yeah.
it was a lot of excitement. And so it was unique. And I understand the blow up. But what I didn't understand until just now, and what I think is unfair, is you connect with these guys off the court, you reconcile, you work it out, you and Magic, you and Gary Payton. We don't know about that, right? So all
Yeah.
anybody hears about is what they see, and it's unfortunate. But it's good to hear that, let's say 90% of the time, 75% of the time, you're good with these guys off the court.
People don't understand this. What happens during the game is part of competition. When I was a competitor, I wasn't always the nicest guy in the world. I'd be the first one to tell you that. And when I talk to people like Gary Payton, especially, where you just realize that he was competing, he was out there competing. That you're not going to get the guy at Sunday school while he's competing. And now there are some guys who can do that, where they're just as gracious as they can be all the time, whether they're competing or not. And that's awesome. But when the games are over, we can go to the bar and have a beer. One of the best guys that used to always talk about this was Jerry Sloan. Like he'd scream and yell. And I remember he and I got into it, and I actually apologized for something I said to him. And he goes, "Hey, kid, don't you worry. When the ball goes up, I'm going to get on you. You get on me, and I'll meet you at the Hilton for a beer afterwards." And sure enough, we went to the Hilton afterwards. He was sitting right there, and a beer came my way. He was a man of his word. That's how it should be, right? And I think for most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, that's what helped. Yeah, we moved.
That's good to know as a fan. I think I
Well,
appreciate
one
that.
thing you have to remember is we understand the competitive juices, and we see the people on the court, but we have to move on, because we get graded on every single call, every single decision. And I'm not going to mess up another play that's going to make you mad, because I want to get an A+ on my test every single night. I don't want to get 99 out of 100. I want to try and get 100 out of 100. Have I ever done it? Oh, I'm 0 for 1,750 regular season games, and I'm 0 for 300 playoff games. And that's a lot of offers. I've never had a perfect game in my career. So that'd be the first one to take that.
Did you ever lose your cool during a game?
Sure.
Ooh.
Yeah. You have to, it comes with your experience and your training, where you have to make decisions out of what's happened rather than emotion. But you're always going to have a moment in your life, and I don't care what you do for a living, where your emotions make you make a good decision or bad decision. But yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I've lost my emotions from time to time. But I think that the management team of the NBA through the years has helped every referee with that. And so that's why sometimes we get labeled as robotic or something like that, or not unnatural or all these different words they use to describe us. It's all because we're being trained on how to deal with people. And so we come off as professional as we can. And then there's just nights where that's just not going to happen.
You had mentioned getting graded and having an offer in your season, which I appreciate that honesty. How does that work? Do you get graded immediately? Does it come via email? Is it weekly? How does that work?
So it works a lot of different ways. First of all, every NBA referee is their own worst critic. And if they're not, they wouldn't be NBA referees. And so when we get to the locker room, I've had people throw stuff in the locker room where they're like, "I can't believe I missed that call," or they're upset with themselves, that sort of thing. So when we do actually miss a play, it's about 0.34 seconds after we make that mistake that we realize it, before you see the replay and you realize it. So we're our own worst critics. So that's the first grading we get. But we do get graded. We have a review team that goes through each tape bounce by bounce the next day. They form a report based on correct calls, incorrect no calls, correct no calls. And they have all these different stats. Like they can call me in March and say, "We've noticed that you've missed X amount of travels, which is above the league average. We really need you to work on pivot feet," whatever. Or they can see trends in my missing D3s, whatever it might be. So they have all the statistical analysis from their data-driven, their reviews. And so that helps them rank us as play callers from 1 to 74. It helps them to identify where we have weaknesses, and they can help us. And it also helps them with the weaknesses of our staff, which then helps them say, "Okay, we need to really work on points of education or traveling or legal screens or whatever, freedom of movement, whatever it is." And so that data has been invaluable to the NBA in helping train us to, be better at our jobs. But we're graded like that. We're also graded we have development advisors, and then we have the head of basketball operations, head of referee operations. They all have a weigh in on our rankings. They put all that into a computer, boom, and it spits out our composite ranking, and we go from there. I would say my development advisor, being in my 31st year, send me probably less plays than a first year referee. but I get as many texts and emails saying, "Hey, you take a look at this. What did you think about this? Hey, can you help us with our report here?" So on and so forth. And then after every game, I file a game report with the NBA stating pretty much any pertinent mistake that the crew made during the game that may have changed how this team subbed or how the game proceeded. I send that to the NBA, and then it helps them with, again, their evaluation of the crew's performance and their L2M. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, I told you before we started talking, I'm in tech. That's my day job.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about social media. Let's call that the bad side of tech as it relates
Okay.
to the game.
I
But
agree.
you're talking about the good side of tech, which is amazing to me. The replay rule as a fan kind of changed things, but I know that there's more technology in the horizon. Again, we talked about this before we started the show.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on technology improving the game, changing the game, making your calls easier? You had mentioned one particular technology that's coming soon. If you could talk more about that.
Yeah, it's actually here. So we have the Hawkeye system, which is in the replay center. It was used last year for goaltending, and then with balls on downward flight and the ball in the cylinder. And I think the future of it, it's going to be which fingertip it last went off of the 100 fingertips we're dealing with. So they'll have that. And then I'm sure there's some other uses for the Hawkeye. But in the future, I think we'll have referees wearing earpieces. The ball go out of bounds, and it'll be off number 41's left index finger. And the replay center will say into the microphone, "It's white ball." Boom, white ball. And obviously, if we don't go that direction, I think the replay center will tell us quicker that it's white ball without us going over to the monitor and putting on the headsets and that sort of thing. If it's challenged, or maybe it's for whatever reason, however we get there. That's here. We've had we used to have replay in the last 2 minutes where I triggered replay, where if I thought, oh, this is a really tough out of bounds ball, I'm going to go take a look at it. And what happened was you'd be in playoff games that really matter. All the games matter, but now you're in game 6 or you're game 7.
Yeah.
And you're in the last 2 minutes of crunch time, and you have to get these plays right. So you feel the need to be confirmed on so many out of bounds plays. So you're going over there and you're going over and you're finding out you're right or you're wrong. And it's slowing the game down. The fans are ready to throw stuff on the floor, that sort of thing. So the NBA was smart. They gave the coaches a challenge, and now the coaches have to figure out, do I hold the challenge for that out of bounds play in the last 2 minutes, or that foul in the last 2 minutes? And it's helped us move the game along. And meanwhile, come to find out in my video study that all those times we went over to look at the out of bounds in the last 2 minutes to confirm ourselves, we probably didn't need to do that, because I can't think of one play this past season, knock on wood, where I went, oh my goodness, we really kicked that out of bounds play. And again, like I said, it's one of the harder plays in the game to officiate. So, because it's so quick.
So it sounds like you're pro technology. You're good.
I'm fine with it. If it keeps me out of the papers and out of Twitter, I'm all about it. No, I think it helps us do our jobs more efficiently or more effectively. I remember back in the day before replay, watching knockdown, drag out fights between umpires and baseball and coaches, face to face, nose to nose, blah, blah, blah. And you still see that from time to time, but not as often, because now it's just challenge. Oh, he was saved. Challenge, he was out. And you see people pretty much get thrown out now for arguing balls and strikes, but you don't see anybody get thrown out for arguing whether you safe or out at home or on a tag play a second. You just see balls and strikes now, which, could be because they're being misled by the box that we all see on TV that isn't really the strike zone. So again, bad information to the public. And I think sometimes when social media goes goofy, it's really because they got bad information somewhere. And that's a good illustration of it. But I am pro technology. I'm pro replay. I didn't like replay when I first came in, because I really looked at my first 4 years in the NBA before we had replay. I looked at it as an opportunity to step up, as an opportunity to step over to a 30-year veteran and say, no, that shot was late. We have to wipe it. I know you scored, but we got to wipe it. And for a second-year referee to be able to go up to an Ed Rush or a Joey Crawford or some one of those veterans back in the day and say, you got it wrong, I think it's late, and then get it right, was a great opportunity. With replay now, I can still do that, but there's a safety net to make sure that we get it right. So, when I first got in the league, if I worked 70 games in a season, there's 280 last second shots. And I would take that opportunity 280 times to say, is it good or is it late? Oh, it's late. And then if somebody scored it, I was able to go in to a finals referee in my second year and say, hey, they shouldn't win. They should win because the shot's late. And that happened several times in my first 4 years. And I think it led to my ascent to crew chief, and then to the playoffs and to the ultimate finals. So that's gone for young referees now. And I think that was a great opportunity when I was first there, but that's okay. This is better because we get the plays right more often because of
Yeah.
replay. And you don't
And
have a situation which replay. We had a game and this was actually interesting. We had a game 5 in, I think it was Jersey, Indiana. And there was a game winning shot, I believe, by Reggie. And it sent the game to overtime. It was late, but they scored it. But what happened was, so we got replay the next year. So when we were being trained on replay the next year, nobody ever told us whether we got the play right in the Indiana Jersey game. But when we were in the studio with doing the thing with the replay, we realized that the clock that you see on TV has 1/10 more than the actual clock. So if you're watching at home and you see the ball
Wow.
come out of Reggie's hand, it says point 0.1 on the superimposed clock. But if you're in the arena, it said 0. And so Leon Wood was shooting a basketball and we were showing the technology. And all of a sudden we all went, oh my God. Now, 1/10 of a second doesn't sound like a lot, but guess what? In basketball, that's 27 frames. And is it 9? Anyway, it's a number of frames of film. You being a tech guy could tell me. But we were like, maybe they did get it right in New Jersey, or actually, it actually meant they got it wrong in New Jersey. But New Jersey ended up winning the series and moving on. I believe they went to the finals that year. But that call almost changed history. And so
Wow.
that was, and then unfortunately, I was a part of a rule. You don't want to be a part of a rule change. I called what I thought was goaltending in the game in Portland, which sent the game to overtime. And it was like, everybody thought we got it right. In fact, the announcers told me I got it right. And I got back to the locker room and I got it wrong. And the next year they put in goaltend replay. And then one of my bosses had a restricted area block where we couldn't rule on this thing. We'd replay with the inability to get it right when that should never happen. And they were like, you know what? That's wrong. We shouldn't do that. And they changed that replay. So anytime you can help me get these plays and not look like a fool while I'm sitting there looking at it on replay, I'm all about it.
Nice.
Yeah.
It sounds. Oh, Steve, go ahead.
no, I wanted to switch gears unless you have something else.
Gets related. So yeah, let me finish with this because I'm getting the sense, Scott, that you're not and I understand it, right? As an umpire, as a referee, you don't want the attention on you. You want it on the game, right?
Yeah.
And I certainly understand that. But there's a point, right, when you have the replay where you've got to go in those national televised games and you've got to get on camera in front of us fans, right? And you have to explain it, right? Billy Kennedy is great at that, right? I think he enjoys it.
I think I think the word you're looking for is charismatic.
100%. Do you dislike doing that?
No, it's not that I don't dislike it. I don't have really a preference either way. But I would say is that anytime I can be the voice of what's going on rather than an announcer who probably doesn't know as much as I do about officiating the NBA, which is all of them. And I respect them all, but I got my guys. I like to fool around with Jeff Van Gundy and just say, I'm glad I get to talk now, but and you don't get to do all the talking. Now I get to say something. But even after I give him the answer, he'll, no, Scott's wrong. Like, I just looked at the replay. But anyway, yeah. So I like it because I think when we can have the ability to voice what we saw, why we have to do what we're doing, it helps everybody understand why we're doing what we're doing rather than, whatever. We've had plays. There was an interesting play in Utah a couple of years ago where the ball, it didn't appear to ever go out of bounds. And the guy who did the broadcast didn't explain why they were giving the ball back to whoever it was, whether it be Utah or the visiting team. And if you go, and we were all, even me, I was watching the game like, what are they doing? How are they getting it back? But no one saw it hit the referee's shoe who was sitting out of bounds, who was standing out of bounds, which means the ball's out of bounds. Yeah. And so we didn't do a good job of explaining that. And it caused this big storm on Twitter and everywhere else. And we had to play, the crew did anyway. But we didn't explain it correctly. And I think that's a great illustration of why this is such a good thing. I think that we're going to continue to get better at it. The NFL officials, I think, are fantastic at it. They're trained at it, and now we're being trained much better. And I think some people are more comfortable at doing it than others, but I think overall it's a good thing to have us tell you as much as we can to help educate the public. Yeah. Getting back to one thing you thought, something we talked about earlier, and I think would latch in here, you talk about, officials always talk about sleepless nights and being their own self. Replay, think about Jim Joyce. I think about Jim Joyce all the time. Here's a guy who has a successful career. And there's other officials in every sport that have this Bill Buckner moment. And I think that wouldn't Jim Joyce love to have had replay that night for that challenge to come in? And now we have this historical game that is historical. And I know for a fact he would love to have that back. And I saw there's a special come out, whether it be ESPN or whatever. And I was like, that is my worst nightmare. I'm living this life, this historical life. And you're in these games of history. And now you're on the wrong side of history. And all you want to do is get it right. All you want to do is get it right. So, yeah.
And for those unaware, Jim Joyce, baseball umpire, who famously, infamously, maybe got a wrong call, costing a player, Armando Galarraga, a perfect game, something that only 20 some odd players have done in the history of baseball.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's rough. And I appreciate Jim Joyce admitting it. I appreciate him and Armando Galarraga being pals about it. They're friendly, which is pretty amazing. In my book, he's got that perfect game. Steve, go ahead.
No, just to switch gears a little bit, Scott. First of all, what's the worst situation? I always like to look at the negative side of things. What's the worst situation?
My whole life was in the negative. Like, it's summertime. Shouldn't we live on the positive side of things? That's my whole
No,
life.
what's the worst situation you ever got in the game or whatever?
Well, I think the goaltend play that ranks when you get back to the locker room. You thought you got it right because 4 announcers are telling you, hey, you got it right. Good call. We're going to overtime. And then you get back and find out you got it wrong. And then the other team loses. And then they go on an 8-game losing streak. Then the coach gets fired the game after I come back and apologize to him for missing that game. And he's a great guy and he's a hard-nosed worker. And you feel like you cost the guy his job. My decisions impact other people's livelihoods. And so that's, again, another reason why it's easy to get up every single night, because I don't want to cost Steve a coaching gig that there's only 29 of them or 30 of them in the NBA. And you don't want to, you got people's livelihoods in your hands. You got to be good. Anyway, but that's the worst case scenario where you've had a gamer call that you got wrong. The best feeling is when you get it right, the right team, when you go, oh my God. And I've been in the NBA for 31 years and I can count on maybe 2 hands, maybe 1, where you come in at the buzzer and go, I got it. Wait, that's a foul. Put 2/10 back on. Nope, sorry, you're not going to win. You're going to win. And it was the right call. It was the right call. That's how you make your living and you make your bones in the NBA, where they trust you to have the courage to make those calls. And whether you're on the road or at your home and you're going to be in the press or whatever, you got to make the right decision. So that's the best feeling when you get it right. The worst is when you get it wrong.
What about fans? How about that? Any stories about that?
Fans are fans. I try and keep it between 94 and 50. Unfortunately, every time I go to talk to a fan, when I turn around, there's 23 cell phones on me. And if I say something even a little out of character, they can take it out of context. So you really have to be careful which. So nowadays, I don't speak to fans very often. I'll smile with them or maybe chuckle with them. I had a guy this year who I told, hey, you got to be more original. Come on. I've heard all this stuff. Come on, be more original. Come on, give it to me. Bring it, because I can take it. And he got a big kick out of it. And he kept trying every quarter during timeouts, and he just never came up with anything original. And really, most stuff that fans say, if they say something original, I get a kick out of it. I laugh. It's fun. I don't take myself as serious as people probably think. But, and I get a good kick out of it when someone gives me a good stinger. I'm all about it. It's good stuff. But the only fan story I'll tell you is I did throw out Magic Johnson. Jack Nicholson came out on the floor and he gave me the choke sign. And I remember literally he was at midcourt and like in the center of the court. And I was like, Jack Nicholson's out on the court. I got people throwing ketchup bottles at me, all kinds of stuff. And so when we came back from halftime, I was standing there with Nolan Fine, God rest his soul. And I said, you know what I should have done? I should have thrown that so-and-so Jack Nicholson out for coming out on the court. And just as I said that nasty word and Jack Nicholson in the same sentence, I get a tap on my shoulder and it's Jack Nicholson. And he came out mid-court and he's apologizing for coming out. And he said, I didn't know Magic bumped you, Scott. I'm sorry. He can't do that. I'm sorry. He had the sunglasses on and the whole LA thing going on. And then from there on, I would see Jack and he would say hello. And I would tease my partner. So I was all in my 2nd or 3rd year, and 30-year veteran. Jack would come and go, hey, Scott, how are you? Scott, oh, and then I'd be with, say, Hugh Hollins or something like that, who had been around for 25 years. And he would just keep walking. And I go, Hugh, hey, Hugh, Jack knows my name. How about that? So just have a little fun with it. But I went and saw a movie a couple of years later, actually it was many years later, and it was about Schmidt. And so that was a movie that Jack Nicholson got a lot of press on. He got a lot of awards on, and I didn't particularly enjoy the movie. And so we had a game in LA, and with 50 seconds left, I believe Kobe went baseline on a hook move, and he's trying to spin towards baseline. He hooked Eldon Campbell, and I called an offensive foul that basically sealed the Lakers' fate. And Charlotte, I believe at the time, was maybe one of the bottom 3 teams in the league on the road. And I looked up and Jack was giving me that same choke sign. And he sat down that end of away from the home bench. And he came down and he was giving me a good piece of his mind. And he kept saying, that's the worst call I've seen in 34 years in these seats, Scott. That's the worst call. And I'm not one of those guys who's quick-witted where I can come up with something. I always think about it 20 minutes later or 2 days, I should have said this, right? But this one, I was waiting on him. I was waiting on him and I looked Jack and I said, that makes us even, Jack, because About Schmidt's the worst effing movie I've ever seen. And Lou Adler, who was sitting there, I guess he's a big timer with Sony or somebody, he literally fell out of the seat laughing. And so that's my only fan story. The other fan story was actually fun, was game 5 in the finals. Matt Damon and Mark Wahlberg were sitting courtside, and Paul Pierce goes off and bring like Boston. They close to within 1. Phil Jackson jumps off the bench and comes out. And I told this story to a group of about 40 referees at camp one year. It just in the bar having fun. And on a podcast, I won't say that podcast, but on a podcast, Matt Damon actually goes word for word with this story I told on a Tuesday, like 6 days later, just like I'm telling you now. And so Phil Jackson got out of his seat and comes running at me. And I thought he was going to take a technical foul. I had no idea why. And he stops on a dime and he looked like, timeout. Oh, okay, my bad. Okay, took timeout. And then he turned to Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon and said some really nasty stuff. Basically, sit down and why don't you two so-and-sos sit down and shut the F up, blah, blah. And I remember Mark Wahlberg's arms are like this big and Matt Damon, I think Matt Damon had just done Born Ultimatum or whatever he did. And they both just sat down in their seats. And as he's walking back, Matt Damon or Mark said, how's that Zen stuff working out for you? And I remember just being like, I'm present in the moment watching this. And then when they came back, Kobe, they're cheering like 12-year-olds. And I think that's why Phil was so mad, because he was right next to the bench. And as Kobe walked by, he looked at Matt and I think he said something like, not tonight, motherfuckers. Yeah. So it was a really cool scene. And then on top of that, I put the ball back in play. And as I was going up the court, my wife's favorite birthday twin artist had appeared out of nowhere in a cloud of purple. And Prince was sitting courtside at game 5 in the NBA finals. And that was one of my top moments in the NBA, is just seeing all this, living in the moment and seeing all this silliness going on. So as far as fans go, I don't really, when I'm doing my actual job, I'm pretty focused on what I'm doing. I don't hear the guy in the 23rd row. I hear the guy in the 2nd row, but not most of those people behave. Most of those people behave because they got to see me time and time again.
And they paid a lot for those seats. They don't want to get kicked out too.
Usually people get kicked out or using their boss's seats, or it's their first time sitting down low, or they came up from the rafters or they won the employee of the month. I don't know how they got there, but the people who sit courtside usually know we don't get like this. And they get a card before the game saying, don't behave like this. So when I was in Washington growing up, Robin Ficker would sit behind the bench of the Bullets, and he would scream and yell at the team. And he was a part of the show. And then I think when they went to the news place in the Verizon Center downtown DC, they told Robin Ficker, you can't sit there. And he said, no, thank you. I want to sit there or else. So he took his money and went somewhere else. But yeah, we have all kinds of stories like that.
Just going off of that travel, how was that like on the road? Just let's say you go from one place to the next and you have the time you have to be there. Just a little bit about.
Yeah, an average month for me will be about 12, 13 games a month. I work pretty much every other night, some nights back to back. And maybe if let's say I had LA Clippers on a Friday, I could work the Lakers on Saturday. They're playing a different opponent. And that helps. I like that because I just stay in the same bed and go to the same arena. It's great. Same thing with places that are really tight, like Chicago and Milwaukee. They make it convenient. But normally I have to be in the night before the game. If I'm working a back to back, I have to take the first flight out the next day to the next game. And I'm on the road 21 to 23 days a month during the season, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then when the playoffs occur, the first 2 weeks of the playoffs for me are pretty busy. I work, depending on how the series go, as far as they assign us the games before they even happen, but I'll be on the road for probably the first 2.5 weeks of the playoffs. So you're grinding, you're going hard. You might get home for a day here, a day there, but you're really locked in and you're getting after it, which is the best time of the year. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not like we're going from Portland to Miami. I'm working Portland on Tuesday and Miami on Thursday. That doesn't happen. I'm more like Portland then Denver, or Denver then Phoenix, close Utah, whatever. That's close. And so that's how we do it. And we work in crews. We work in crews, but very rarely does the same crew travel together to another game. But sometimes we do. But usually if I'm working on LA with 2 other people, then the next night I might be working in Portland with 2 other people.
When do you get your schedule? How do you get the whole season schedule or a little bit or?
Now, baseball gets their schedule the whole season. My umpire friends will send me, hey, I'm coming to so-and-so here, look at my whole schedule. And boy, wouldn't that be great? But no, the NBA season is a little more fluid, I think. And so we get our schedule usually the 5th of the month prior. So let's say I'm working in December, I'll get my December schedule on November 5th. But if, let's say they know I'm going to work Christmas Day, they'll probably tell me in about 3 or 4 weeks, by the way, we've decided you're working Christmas and don't make any plans. And so, and then sometimes like I'll volunteer for Christmas because my kids are old and we have other crew chiefs say we have young kids and I want them to do the Santa Claus thing and I'll just go work. Yeah. So people did that for me when I was young and that's why I do it for them. So, but yeah, the travel, I thought it used to be travel was the toughest part of the job. And now it's still, I mean, it wears on you, but you get used to it. It's a lifestyle.
When
Favorite
you,
cities?
that's what I
You
was
know
going to.
what? Yeah, my favorite city is anywhere it has pickleball courts, and I like doing that. Warm weather is fun, but even now today with indoor pickleball, that sort of thing. But I like doing outdoorsy stuff. Some people may confuse the fact that I like going to say Phoenix. That means I like the Phoenix Suns. That's not necessarily the case. The town of Phoenix is usually 70 degrees. LA is 70 degrees. Miami is 70 degrees during the winter. And so anytime you can get away from 32 below in Minnesota to go to 75 in Miami, you want to go there. But that doesn't mean I don't like Minnesota because I like going to Minnesota because I have lots of friends I play pickleball with there and indoors. Obviously, we don't play outdoors during January in pickleball. But anyway, there's lots of things. I like walking to the garden instead of like I literally always walk to the garden for the games because I just the energy in the streets of New York really pumped me up. It's just really cool to just walk the streets. And my crew they laugh because we were walking down the street and somebody will just boo me, just boo Foster, and they're joking or maybe they're being serious, but it's fun. Yeah, so I love doing that. I like going to a lot of the cities. I like going to Denver because I can go for a hike. I can go into so many different places. It depends on the season, where we are in the season. When it's April, I want to maybe I'll be somewhere where we can get outside and just enjoy the outdoors. Yeah.
Restaurants and things like that don't.
I have my spots everywhere. Like in Philadelphia, I have Bill's Breakfast, which is my spot where I can get scrapple and eggs, which if you're from Maryland, you know what that's all about. And people don't eat scrapple, but we do. And then if I'm in Boston, I got my clam chowder place. If I'm in Portland, I got my steak place, or Denver, same thing. And everywhere you go, you make your list of places you want to go and things you want to do as far as eating or seeing people. And that's really one of the perks of the job is getting to travel and see different people. And that I have friends all over the country. So they're excited to see me when they get 2 free tickets to an NBA game.
Yeah, I'm sure that goes a long way. Season to
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Is there any point of emphasis, right? That the NBA maybe gives you rest. Listen, we're going to crack down on traveling. We're going to crack down on this. Does that change or is it pretty standard year to
No,
year?
it changes. It changes from year to year based on that statistical analysis. I believe they do, or the board of governors will come up with through their competition committee, that sort of thing, where we've maybe been lax or we let some slippage get into our game, and then we'll really crack down on that. Or say we have a new rule coming up, like maybe it was this year we just had the flopping rule come in, and so we'll be educated a lot more on that, and then we'll be sent videos more so all the time about that. I think traveling has been everybody. Oh, why don't you call traveling? We don't call traveling because you probably don't know what traveling is. What traveling is in high school basketball and in college basketball isn't the same as an NBA based solely on our interpretation of the gather step or whatever. Post play is the same in high school and in the NBA. And so everybody can complain about that. But when it comes to gather plays, a lot of times you'll see Giannis go 44 feet in 2 steps and wonder how that's not traveling. But it's because he can go 44 feet in 2 steps. Now, I'm being facetious here and I'm kidding, but I've seen so many people put on, look at so-and-so, he took 5 steps. And then when you break it down, you see the ball hovering or you see the ball get loose or the ball got tapped or he took a late gather set, gathered it while the foot was down. Now he gets 2 more. It looks like 3. I get it. And then, of course, we do have the egregious miss from time to time where you just go, I hope that's not me on that video. Oh, good, it's not. And but every year traveling is one of our points of education. Screening a couple of years was a point of education. Freedom of movement, point of education. Flopping, point of education. Freedom, we call it respect for the game guidelines, point of education, which is basically, we're not going to let people throw the ball in the stands. We're not going to let people bounce the ball. We're not going to talk like this. We're going to allow you to, but then it educates the players. We're going to allow you to do this, but then you got to come down, that sort of thing. Yeah, it helps us. It used to be we had referees, and I might qualify for this. We had referees who a guy would call you every name in the book and no technical foul. And then you had other referee would call you some of the names in the book and definitely be a technical foul. And what we had to do was we had to bring those 2 groups of people closer together and make it so we're all in between the 45-yard line on each side of the 50-yard line rather than on the 10-yard lines at each end of the football field. And so having those points of education each year helps it to make it. I'll give you another example. Place in the basket. You had some referees who would just call every little touch a foul. And then you have some referees who would call if the ball went in, it's never a foul. And this, I'm talking 1970s. Okay. I'm not talking about, I'm talking a long time ago. And so again, the NBA getting the staff to a point where we're all consistent and trying to call the same contact a foul. That's not a foul. And again, we live in the gray. We know that. So that's hard to explain to people who are not NBA referees. Even people who are connected to the NBA it's hard to explain. And honestly, sometimes we'll be at camp, we'll put a play up and we'll have 75 referees in there and we'll take a vote or we'll argue. Was it a block? Was it a charge? Was it a block? Was it a charge? Was it illegal screen? And it'll be 40-35. And it's like, how can this be? And so if you have us arguing about it, imagine Celtics versus Lakers fans arguing about it. So we get it. Yeah.
You mentioned traveling. I had written down a couple other things that, as a fan are frustrating, and it's probably just us seeing it wrong. But 3 seconds and palming the ball, those seems like that could be called every time down the court.
So Jose, I want to ask you a question. How old are you?
I'm 60 years old.
Okay. So I was going to say you're at least 60 years old. Here's why. I was just at the pickleball courts and this happens to me every day because everybody at the pickleball courts is 60 years old. And so anybody who's 60 or older, they remember Bob Cousy and Jerry West dribbling a basketball. Even Oscar Robertson dribbling a basketball like this, hand on top of the ball. And then I'm just going to use a name. Allen Iverson comes along and he brings some playground ball into it. And the hand becomes to the side of the ball.
Right.
So then even my dad, when he would ask, oh my God, you called a carry tonight. I'm like, my dad's giving me crap about my calls. And he's like, I called a carry. I didn't think you called that anymore. I'm like, Dad, his hand went under the ball. He wasn't on the side of the ball. And so we have guidelines for carries, and that is the ball has to come to a pause while the hand goes underneath the ball. And we do things like read the defender and the defender gets frozen because he shows him the ball and then goes. So obviously carry. But a hand on the side of the ball to a 60-year-old or an 80-year-old doesn't look like Bob Cousy and it doesn't look like Jerry West. And so I guess my point is that everybody above 60, 65, 75, they always ask me about the carry. I never have a 20-year-old say, yeah, you guys just don't go carry. Never.
You're right.
Never happened. But it's all because of the guidelines we used on how to judge that play and what we deem as an advantage from allowing the ball to come to a pause. And so that's one thing. The traveling, again, the gather step makes things look a lot worse. The speed of the game. We were trained for, I don't know how many years to referee the defense, which means your main focus on the defense. The ball handler's right there. He hasn't started to dribble yet. And you have your head on the defender. Now this guy makes a move and you go, huh. And then you're refereeing the defense. So you didn't see the jab step where he moved his pivot foot. So our training has changed. Now we go foot, dribble, defender, right? So you're on the feet, you're on the dribble. Now you go to defender. So we have a new sequence so we can referee that play much better. And people will say, people that say always or nevers, I can refute that every single time because there's never an always and there's always never. I can show that statistically our travel calls are up hundreds of % since 19 whatever or 2000 or whatever. So we're getting better at it. We're calling more of them. I think if you ask some of our players, we're calling too many because these guys work on their moves. These guys work. They do work and they work on their moves. And when you do call a travel, that's not a travel. And you've taken that thing they've worked on so many hours in the gym. They're out there today. They're all working. They all have 3 workouts today. They're getting ready for the season. They're working on those moves. And when you take that away from them and you take 2 points away from their team, it's a big deal. And that's just part of what we do. And so calling a travel that's not there is part of our problem as well. But we just keep watching the tape. And when you're watching tape and from my eyes and you travel, you go, God, and you're angry because you were watching the feet, but you didn't see the feet split or you didn't realize it was his right foot was a pivot foot. You thought it was his left foot and then he takes off and you go, oh, doggone it. And you miss. Yeah. You should see the angry when we're in tape sessions, when we miss travels, you take a pad, you throw it across the room and it's comical, but it's one of those plays. I probably get more mad about missing a travel than I do an elbow to the face. Probably not. Just kidding.
As a fan, right? Because that's always been our focus here on the site. The number one thing that people ask me is about that 2-minute report, right? That comes out. Generally speaking, fans, they don't see the point, right? It's illogical. And I made the point earlier to you that it's just used to justify people's Twitter rants, right? See, I told you I was right.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything. Do you guys throw clipboards over that 2-minute report? Do you as a referee not really care about that?
If I'm being honest, it doesn't affect me one way or the other. I get a little frustrated when maybe a play that is judged incorrect, could have been correct, or vice versa. I think sometimes we, on say Monday, the L2M will say this is a legal play, and something this much different will happen Wednesday, and we say it's an illegal play. And that's the difference, is the line of gray, the shade of gray that we were in. And so there's some frustration there, I would say, from my standpoint. But what I would also say about that is that the public, I think everybody focuses on the negative of those L2Ms, which is, if you look, there's 42 decisions and you have 2 NCIs. One is something we haven't called in 3 years,
Right.
or maybe it's just that it's really almost unfathomable to call that because you couldn't see that with the naked eye, that sort of thing. And they've done a better job on the L2M of allowing some human error as far as, okay, you only moved this pivot foot that much. You're not gonna say that's a travel if you move this foot hair. But everyone focuses on the negative and they don't look at the positive. And when we do say something positive, they go, nah, I still don't believe it. They're just covering themselves. Like, wait a second. We told you all this negative stuff every year. We had a game some years ago that had 14 errors in it. In the last, they had overtime. So you're doing 6 minutes of L2Ms, 2 in the fourth, 2 in the first over, 2 in, you do a triple overtime game. You have 8 minutes of calls, decisions that people are going to see. That's almost a whole quarter. And then they see 4 errors in 8 minutes and you go, oh my God. And that is a lot. We did 24 errors in a 48-minute game. That's above our average by a lot. But again, we focus on the negative too often. And then when the positive is out there, nobody wants to believe that.
Right.
So that's where we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. Now, the whole point of the L2M is not to educate the public, but it's also to be transparent with our work. And that I'm fine with. Because in my game reports that I send to the NBA after the game, it's usually my words in that L2M. I'll see my exact quote that I put in my game report. So-and-so moved his pivot foot prior to the dribble, blah, blah. And now I go, oh, I just sold my crew out. That's the honesty in my work. And I take pride in that honesty because that way the NBA trusts me implicitly to work game 7 in the NBA finals, because I'm going to tell them, yes, we messed up, or no, I disagree. We didn't mess up. So, but I think the L2M is a necessary evil in a lot of ways for the NBA, not so much for me.
Scott, this is one of my last ones, but for you guys, for the NBA player, you said before, and we all know they play year round. They're working on their game all the time.
Yeah.
During the season, how much work you guys putting in besides the actual game? And then in the summer, how much work you guys putting in studying and doing whatever it is that you do?
Yes. Let's start with the in season. Well, let's start at the preseason. So right now we have camp 3 weeks from today or tomorrow. And we're all getting ready for our physicals and getting our bodies ready to go. And, obviously being 57 years old, it takes me a little, more to figure out how I'm going to do this. I'm doing cold plunge. I'm running. I'm doing the cycle, the Peloton, all this stuff. And getting your body ready for the preseason is pretty much the biggest thing you can do. And then, of course, refreshing your rules knowledge, your case knowledge, all that stuff, and just being sharp with the rules. So when you take your tests and you come to camp, you're prepared. That's important. Once the season starts, it's a nonstop grind from October 4th to the day you stop working playoff games, and even the people who don't work in the finals are still watching games in the playoffs every night. They're texting you, hey, what'd you think about this play? Hey, I clipped this play I saw on Twitter. Hey, and we have all kinds of websites we use. We have a system where I can go to the computer, I can go to a play, I can clip the play, I can make a link, I can send it to Steve, and Steve can then look at my call from 9 different angles and tell me, oh, left hand held angle shows you were right, it was a block, or, oh, overhead right angle shows it was a charge, that sort of thing. So we are doing that every single day. And then on top of that, our development advisors are sending emails, texts, and stuff like with those same links. So let's say they see a review come back 6 days after the game and it shows that Scott made 8 or more errors. They'll red flag that game and say, geez, Scott had a bad night. We got to find out what's going on. Either our reviewer had a bad night or Scott had a bad night. Okay. Oh, we'll give Scott credit for a good call there. Okay. So now he's down to 7 errors, but he still had a bad night. And then might share those links with me or the other referees that are part of our program. And that'll help me to grow and to identify where I'm weak. And so that happens every day. Then on top of that, if you are good at your job, you have a group of people you are constantly in contact with. So I have a group of different text groups, not just one, different text groups where we're constantly sharing information, asking questions, sharing links. It can go on all day. And so one of my text chains during a playoff game is if one of us is working, the other 3 guys are texting the entire game. You'll go back to halftime and you'll look at your phone and there's 321 texts and it's about your game. So you're going through and you're looking at, oh, hey guys, look at 921. They say I got that wrong. Or hey, look at 921. They say that's a good call. You know what I mean? So you're becoming more and more aware with every game. The workload is every day. Also in the season, we do things called video breakdowns where as a crew, we have to sit and we have to have a form and we go bounce by bounce and we discuss whether the call is right or wrong, why, what we did positive on the play, what we did negative on the play. And it just helps educate, teach. It helps facilitate good discussion between the crew. And honestly, watching videotape as a crew leads to exponential learning. And makes for a faster, steeper climb for any referee. I've seen so many younger referees or high school referees where I see them in camp in June of this year. They watch tape 40 games from this year. And because of that, their improvement is much more steep than if they were just not to ever watch tape. So we do that every day. And then we do that as a group. Then on top of that, we have weekly tests. We have all kinds of stuff that we do on Mondays. So we're held accountable. People don't think we're held accountable.
Right.
I don't know that there's anybody else anywhere held accountable or scrutinized as much as NBA referees are. And I say that as humbly as I possibly can, but we hold ourselves accountable. The NBA holds us accountable, and then we're graded and evaluated consistently and over again.
About how many calls are made in a game?
So
You
I don't
said
know what the
7
answer is.
hours. I'm trying to
What's that?
figure it. You said if you had a 7 hours, you had a bad game. So I'm just
Oh,
thinking
right. Yeah,
how
yeah.
many, you know, in context of that,
Yeah. So
how
I
many
think the average NBA game probably it used to have, back in the 90s or say Stockton and Malone were with Utah, that generation, we'd have 50 fouls, 54 fouls a game. Now we are down where we don't have as much post play. The game's more wide open, more freedom of movement, people running around, people shooting threes, so no pressure on the basket as much as we used to. Nope, not as much isolation in the low post in a 2-man game. Um, so our fouls have gone down early in my career by 54 down. I'm thinking probably 40, 42, somewhere in there. Some nights 38, sometimes 16. I tell young referees sometimes, look who we had tonight. These guys just don't foul. So don't worry about that. You don't have too many whistles tonight. Relax. Good decisions could be no calls. So go relax and just referee the game, because we have coaches who are teaching don't foul. Let's just go as fast as we can and see if it was 142 points. So that's fine. And it's good back. So anyway, I would say, let's say we have 40 foul calls. That's not how many decisions we have. We have so many no call corrects and incorrects and violations, that sort of thing. Let's just say on a night we're graded on 120 plays. If the crew has more than 10 errors, that's where you go, "Man, I hope we could have done better." You don't get too upset. You're not like, oh my God, we're terrible. And obviously errors can be weighted. If I miss at 3 seconds at 11:51 and I miss a guy getting his arm chopped off at point 0.9 in a tie game, those are two bigger, different errors. We all know that. But in our review process, those errors are the same.
Right.
Who had a better night? The guy who missed 11:51, 3 seconds, or the guy who missed the chopping of the arm at the buzzer? I think we all know that.
So I guess what we're saying here is that you're probably getting more than on a normal night over 90%. Correct.
I would say that when we blow the whistle, we are credited with a correct call in the 90s, in the 90 percentile. It could be high 90. Where we get dinged up with errors is no call incorrects, meaning we missed travel or we deemed a contact incidental that was illegal. That's where we get dinged up with errors in our business. But when we blow the whistle, we're usually pretty good. When we put air in the whistle, we saw it, we processed it, made a decision. And that's when you do that, you take it slow on the ball, you're going to be successful as an NBA referee.
In prepping for this, I found out, I don't know if there's an accurate, I think it's pretty close. You run between 1 and 4 miles a game, which to me is pretty staggering. I'm a swimmer, not a runner. I can't imagine doing that time and time again. So keeping in shape, the question that Steve just posed, I think is important because that's staggering to me. We're winding down. We've just got a few questions left. This one is mine, and then we've got 2 from people on our team. We wanted to know, is there any merit to the superstar no call? This is, again, something fans want to ask, some want to know. Rookies, it seems like they don't get the calls. Superstars get the call. Is there any merit to that, or is that just us seeing what we want to see as fans?
I think it's just not understanding what's going on. A rookie doesn't get called because a rookie doesn't know how to get calls, meaning he doesn't know how to compromise a defender like Michael Jordan did. He doesn't know how to compromise a defender like James Harden did, or that sort of thing. So they are learning the game. Just like an NBA referee comes in their first year, they're not going to call a play from 45 feet away as often as maybe a 31-year referee like myself, because they don't have that comfort level. So a lot of, and the other thing is when people come in, they're like, I'll hear from the rookies this year. I know I'm not going to get that call. And I have to let them know, if you got fouled, you're getting the call, because I'm not taking an error because you're a rookie. I want to get an A+ on my test every night. And so that makes no sense at all that you're not going to get that call. And it bothers me that some coach somewhere during their training has told them, you're not going to get that call. That's just not true. And probably their veteran guy and escalating themselves is also telling them that. But here's what I would say about the stars. It's funny that you have so many stars. And if you talk to Shaquille, one of our greatest players of all time, he talked about how much he got fouled during his career, right? But wait a second, he was a star player. Why is he not? If you talk to pretty much any star, they will tell you they did not get the calls they deserve. It's just, that's the nature of the game. So who's right here? Either they are getting the calls or not. So I always say everybody's getting fouled, but nobody's fouling out here, because that's the way it is. So I think that Michael, who I adore because of his graciousness and everything he did for basketball, I think with the Jordan rules, I think that's when that came to be, where the public went, oh my gosh, even Michael Jordan says he gets favorable calls. And I think that's where this came from. I think if you ask most stars today, they would tell you, I'm not getting my fair share. In fact, I can tell you for a fact that that's what they tell me. Yeah, I just don't buy that. But really for me, the rookie thing is easy. They're learning the game. Their first year in the league. They're not going to know. Sometimes you'll see a guy pump a guy and the defender will jump out of his face and you go, oh, here it comes. And then he doesn't get the foul because he didn't do what he's supposed to do. And you go, oh, you had him. You had him. Didn't you work on that pressure? You had him. You had him out of his face, and you could have just jumped towards the rim a little bit and you would have got the foul, but they don't know because it's their third game.
So that's interesting. Has that happened to you where you've ever pulled a rookie aside and go, dude, next time do this and you get the call?
I'm not a
Is that
coach.
not been
No, I'm not a coach. If the player asked me about a play and maybe there was a marginal contact or he didn't get a call because of for some reason, I can explain to him why. But I'm not going to go up to a player and say, here's what you want to do so you can get that foul on so-and-so over there. Because I don't think I'm not a coach in the NBA. Although at my end of my career, I think I'd love to be like a referee consultant if I can't find a job in management at the NBA, just because I think love to stay connected to the game. So we'll see.
Yeah. Nice. We had 2 questions left. These are from our team members here. Josh Owens asked, and I think you answered this, but let's ask it anyway. Who's the hardest player to officiate?
I'm not going to get into current players, but I will say back in the day, we don't have as much post play as we used to have in the 90s. And so when Shaquille and Yao were in the league, when Karl Malone were in the league, those guys in the post were really bang and bang. Understanding back then what the guidelines were and where the line was really difficult for me, I think our staff in general. And if you were to ask Shaquille, I think he would agree that he was the hardest player to referee because he was so strong. He could blow through what would normally be deemed illegal contact and make it look marginal because he was so strong, so fast, so agile, and power dunk and run down the floor. And for the most part, Shaq just played. Some nights he'd get frustrated because he was getting beat up. But I think Shaq and Yao were 2 players that as a young referee, I struggled with because there was so little post play. There's not post play like that. Maybe back in the early days of Bob Lanier and Kareem and all those guys, that might be the deal, or Will. But by the time the 90s came around, that was the toughest thing. And then it disappeared. We don't have that back to the basket smash mouth basketball anymore, which is, like I said, was hard to officiate. Understanding, did Shaq kill that guy or did he flop? That's hard. And when bodies are smashing like that. So I would say that in my career, Shaquille was tough and Yao, for whatever reason, he was tough too. Yeah.
I wouldn't. Yao's game.
Well, Yao was just so big and we had the restrict area had come in. And Yao was like around the restrict area all the time and people were just running at him. And so you have to jump to get out of the restrict area and try and block the shot. And so Yao would just jump without blocking the shot and it was still a foul and just silly stuff like that. So Shaq was in a class by himself as far as difficulty to referee. I just put that out there because if you put the 2 of them in the same game together, that was not fun.
Right. Got it. We'll leave the last question here for Isaac Edelman, a good friend of our site. He asked, and he's interested to know if you're ever able to enjoy a game. And he gave this example, right? If you're in a game and Curry goes for 60, can you stand there and just be in awe of that? Or does the game not allow you to do that?
There are like little moments where you see a play, a dunk or a 3 or a half court shot, whatever it is, where you go, wow. That was, did you see that? I think Peyton Pritchard did something in a playoff game this year. I just went, oh my gosh, that was ridiculous. But really, it's more about reflection after the game. You're focused during the game, and you know that Curry's having a night, or you know that Jason Tatum's having a night, or you know Shaq's having a night, whoever, Kobe. And you might look at the board at the end and go, oh my God, it's 48 or whatever. But you don't necessarily get into the wow factor until after the game. So recently I had a game 7 with Curry. He goes for 50, and I got back to the locker room and I realized whatever, he had a hell of a night, but I didn't realize he broke the record for game 7s of all time. And then a week later or 2 weeks later, I work at game 7 in Boston, and Tatum breaks that record by 1 point. And again, during that game, I knew he was having a good game, but I didn't know that he was breaking what I just saw 2 weeks ago. And you get a chance when you're watching the highlights or you're watching your video after the game to reflect upon the history that you got to see or be a part of. And that's cool. And then when you see highlights from like some games I don't even remember, and I'll see Classic Sports or something like that, where they'll be doing a special on Mike Breen, like they did a thing on Bang. And you see yourself in the background of a game at Oklahoma City where Curry's just launching threes. And I remember distinctly one of the bangs that Mike Breen does. Curry pulls up from 38 feet, and he has no reason to do that. There's 21 on the shot clock. There's plenty on the game clock, but he pulls up from 38 feet and just shoots it like layup. And I remember thinking, that's probably a good decision. That's a good decision. 38 footer. And he nothing but net. And Mike Breen does the bang. And so they show that after the game. Then maybe a week ago, I'm watching that thing on TV, and I'm like, I was a part of that history of, at least I was there. I wasn't a part of it, but I got to watch that. And so that's where you get the all. Or like when Kobe passed, and I did this on purpose, in game 7, Joey had told me, when this game's over, we got to run. We got to get off the court because they're going to be fans are going to be running the court. It's going to be bringing stuff for the trophy presentation. The security's not great. Let's get the hell off the court. Kobe was running down to the south end of the arena, and I saw him running, and the horn's about to expire. And I ran up behind him, knowing there's probably be all these historical pictures. And so I ran up behind him, and sure enough, there's a T-shirt, and it's Kobe going like this, and they've won. And I'm in the background of that. And this guy in Salisbury, my daughter's playing a basketball tournament, is asking me if I would know Kobe. This is years ago. My daughter's probably 9, so it's 14 years ago, 15 years ago. And I said, yeah, I think I know him. I think I'm on that shirt, dude. And I look, and then sure enough, that picture with me in the back, and part of this historical moment, not so much for the Lakers, but for for the NBA. And that to me is cool. And then when Kobe passed, I remember being on the plane, the girl next to me is crying, and I'm like, what? And then I pull that picture up, and I'm like, that's pretty cool to be a part of that. So to answer your question, those are the moments where you go, wow, this is historical. This is really cool to be a part of. And it's not about me. It's about the game. It's about just being a part of this greatness and being near these great athletes and everything like that. But during the game, you're locked and loaded. And especially in a game 7, I think I've done like 20 now, and you don't have a moment to do that. Even on October 13th, if somebody goes for 64, you know it, but you don't. And then you look up at the board and you go, oh gosh, she's got 60. Now, why do they keep, they're up 40. Why is he in the game? And so you look up and you go, oh, he's got 59. They were trying to get him 60. So stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the fun part of the job.
And it honestly, to me, it all sounds fun. I know it's not.
I'm not going anywhere, so I still love it. I still love it.
There you go.
I still love officiating. The negative stuff, I think my skin's getting thick now. It still stings every once in a while when you've had a pretty successful career and you still get judged on one play, or you get judged on something a writer tweeted. And then I've had things on social media where they're talking about something I messed up in Denver. And there's this one problem. I was in Cleveland.
Right.
Like, come on, man. Like, I can't win, right? But yeah.
Yeah, you are all referees, right? Because we know the name, right? Scott Foster got it wrong, and you weren't even in that game.
I made I told my daughter, we were having drinks, and I said, I'll bet you that he was giving me some trash about something. I said, I'll bet you somebody said something nasty about me in the last minute on Twitter. Now, this is July or August, and she's like, you out of your mind. And I said, okay, let's go for it. So we pulled it up, and 9 seconds ago, somebody ripped me because of something that happened in the U.S. Greek France game. And I'm like, see, told you. So it's me, Tony Brothers, Zach Sarver. We're the face of the NBA staff right now. And before I was there, Steve Javie and Joe Crawford were, and before them, Earl Strom and Shake O'Donnell were. And when I'm gone, there'll be somebody else new for them to beat up on. And that'll be their job to take on that role. So it's an honor, tragic honor right now. So yeah, good stuff.
Love it. Steve, unless you've got any other
No, I'm
questions,
good. This is wonderful.
I'm all out. We actually checked every box, asked every question. I learned a ton. This was
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So much fun. And Scott, let me tell you, man, when it's time to wrap up the career, you definitely got a spot here. We
Oh,
pay
cool.
zero. You are welcome. At
Thanks, man.
any point. Go ahead, Steve.
It'd be good being connected to the game in any way I can. But yeah, anytime I can come back and talk basketball with you guys, I'm happy to do so. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more stories after I retire. So it's all good.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, Steve. Jose, thanks. See you guys.
Thank
Have a
you.
great summer.
I hope you all enjoyed our discussion with NBA referee Scott Foster. Enjoy the balance of your time off. I know it's about time to get back to work, but please subscribe, do all that stuff. It means the world to us. And join us next week on 13 Rules NBA Random Thoughts Overtime. We'll talk next week. Thanks again, Scott. Steve, we'll talk to you next
Take
week.
care, guys. See you now.